demand order in this court.
Your Honor, I have identification.
That is irrelevant. You are out of order.
You can't silence me. The people have a right to know.
One more word and you will be held in contempt. This ID is insufficient. State your full legal name.
I am who I say I am. This ID is valid.
I will hold you in contempt. Present valid identification now.
This is valid. I stand by it.
Is this your identification?
Yes, Your Honor, it's valid.
This ID is flagged. It's invalid.
That's impossible. It's a mistake.
You will be detained.
No, this is wrong.
A courtroom is meant to be a sanctuary of justice. Yet for Judge Eleanor Vance, it had become her own private kingdom, built on deep-seated prejudice and driven by raw greed. She wielded her gavel like a weapon, crushing the lives of the innocent, particularly those who looked different from her. One morning, a disheveled black man named Devin Stone stood before her, accused of a minor crime. Judge Vance, seeing an easy target, decided to make an example of him. She insulted him, mocked him, and tried to throw him in jail to rot. What she didn't know was that Devin Stone wasn't a vagrant. He was Director Corbin Hale of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and he wasn't just on trial. He was on her case. The air in Courtroom 3B of the Central District Courthouse was always stale, thick with the scent of old paper, cheap disinfectant, and quiet desperation. Presiding over this chamber of misery was Judge Eleanor Vance, a woman whose black robes seemed to draw all the light and warmth from the room. Her silver hair was pulled back into a bun so tight it looked painful, and her face was a permanent mask of sour disapproval. "Mr. Bradford," she sighed, looking down at a young man with a fraternity haircut and an expensive suit. "This is your second DUI. What do you have to say for yourself?" His lawyer, a slick man named Patterson, stood. "Your Honor, Chad is a good kid. He's applying for a mentorship program with the mayor's office. He simply made a poor judgment call." "He's a menace!" Vance snapped, but there was no heat in it. Still, the mayor's program? Fine. She banged her gavel. $2,500 fine, 100 hours of community service, which I'm sure Mr. Patterson will find a way to fulfill for you, and a 90-day license suspension. Don't let me see you in here again, Mr. Bradford. You're better than this. "Thank you, Your Honor," the young man said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Next case," shouted the bailiff, a burly man named Harlan, who mirrored the judge's unpleasant demeanor. "The People versus Devin Stone." The energy in the room shifted. The side door opened, and a sheriff's deputy pushed a man forward. He was black, in his late 40s, and dressed in a rumpled t-shirt, torn jeans, and a jacket that looked like it had been slept in. His beard was untrimmed, and his hair was matted. This was the man who had been arrested for trespassing in a public park after hours and resisting arrest. Judge Vance's eyes narrowed, her disapproval hardening into genuine contempt. "Well, well, Mr. Stone, stand up straight when you address the court." The man, Devin Stone, simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Your public defender is—" "Ah, Miss Fletcher," Vance said, waving a hand dismissively. A young, visibly nervous woman, Naomi Fletcher, hurried to the podium. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Stone, pleads not guilty. We request bail be set at his own recognizance. He has no prior record, and the charges are—" "What, Miss Fletcher?" Vance's voice was sharp as glass. "He was trespassing. He resisted Officer Kane. Is that what you call minor?" "The resisting charge seems unsubstantiated, Your Honor. My client states he merely asked why he was being arrested." Fletcher fumbled, shuffling her papers. Vance let out a sound that was half scoff, half laugh. She turned her full, venomous attention to the man in the torn jacket. "Mr. Stone, do you have a job?" Devin Stone looked at her. His voice was quiet, raspy. "I'm between projects." "Between projects?" Vance mocked. "Is that what we're calling vagrancy now? Where do you live?" "Here and there." "I see." Judge Vance leaned forward, her knuckles white on her gavel. "So, we have a jobless vagrant who resists police officers and thinks public parks are his personal bedroom, and you want me to release him on his own recognizance so he can go back to resisting and being between projects all over this city." "Your Honor, he has a right to reasonable bail," Fletcher protested weakly. "Rights of tax-paying citizens who contribute to society, Miss Fletcher," Vance said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Not for people like Mr. Stone who drain our resources." The racial subtext was so thick, it was practically a physical object in the room. Devin Stone finally spoke again, his voice clear, not in the least intimidated. "So, Contributing to society is a prerequisite for justice, Your Honor. The courtroom went silent. Judge Vance's face turned a shade of mottled crimson. Are you questioning me, boy? Is that contempt I hear in your voice? I'm asking a question, ma'am, he said, holding her gaze. Ma'am, she shrieked, you will address me as Your Honor, Bailiff Harlan. Yes, Judge. I find this vagrant in contempt of court, and for the original charges, I am setting bail at $50,000. A collective gasp went through the gallery. Fletcher's jaw dropped. $50,000, Your Honor. That's unconstitutional for trespassing. You just let a man who could have killed someone walk out of here with a fine. Are you also in contempt, Miss Fletcher? Vance hissed. One more word and I'll have you sanctioned. Mr. Stone, you will be remanded to the county jail until you can post bond or until your trial date, whichever comes first. And given your attitude, I'll be sure to schedule that trial for as far out as the law allows. Get him out of my sight. Bailiff Harlan grabbed Devin Stone's arm with unnecessary roughness. Let's go, Project. As he was being led away, Devin looked back one last time at Judge Eleanor Vance. He wasn't angry. He wasn't scared. He was memorizing. And as the heavy door slammed shut, Judge Vance smiled, feeling a deep, satisfying sense of order restored. She had put another piece of trash where it belonged. The holding cell in the county jail was a concrete box that smelled of bleach, sweat, and despair. Devin Stone, or as he was known outside these walls, Director Corbin Hale of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, sat on a thin mattress and cataloged his surroundings. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was the culmination of Operation Justice Shield, a multi-agency investigation into Judge Eleanor Vance. It had started with a tip from a terrified whistleblower, a former court clerk named Maria Gonzalez. Maria had brought the FBI a stack of documents. They showed a pattern: nonviolent minority offenders receiving maximum sentences, while wealthy white defendants, especially those represented by certain law firms or connected to certain developers, had their charges disappear. The money trail was complex, laundered through shell corporations and judicial charities. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, led by Agent Morales, had been tracing the money, but the civil rights violations were harder to prove. Vance was clever. Her racism was couched in legal-sounding terms like prior record, vagrancy, and contempt. The operation needed a final piece. They needed to prove unequivocally that Vance's malice was personal, that she would manufacture justice based on her own prejudice. You're insane, Director. Agent Kane, his second-in-command, had argued in the command center. Going in yourself as a vagrant? What if they search you? Find your credentials. They won't, Corbin had said, pulling on the torn jacket. All my credentials, weapons, and comms are with you. I'm going in clean. We need to see her in action. We need to feel the system she's created. We need the audio from inside. He had a tiny, state-of-the-art audio transmitter, no bigger than a grain of rice, surgically implanted. He could activate it with a specific click of his teeth, and it was now live. Everything he heard, everything said to him was being beamed directly to Agent Kane. A key rattled in the lock. Bailiff Harlan stood there, a nasty grin on his face. Got a special visitor, Stone, Harlan sneered. He was flanked by two other guards who looked like they'd been carved from granite. The judge doesn't like being disrespected. She called ahead, wanted to make sure you got the special welcome package. Corbin stood slowly. And what does that entail? It entails you learn your place. The first punch came from Harlan, a hard practice shot to the gut that drove the air from Corbin's lungs. The next two came from the guards, one to the ribs, one to the face. Corbin, highly trained in hand-to-hand combat, had to force himself to take the blows, to collapse realistically, to not disarm all three of them. He crumpled to the floor, tasting blood. That's just a down payment, Harlan panted, adjusting his belt. You keep that mouth of yours shut. Maybe you'll make it to your trial. If not, accidents happen. He kicked Corbin once more in the ribs for good measure, and the three of them left, laughing. Corbin lay on the cold concrete, every part of him aching. He clicked his teeth twice, signaling to Kane. Evidence received. He was right. This was the only way. You couldn't just read a file to understand this level of evil. You had to wear it. The next day, Corbin was brought back to the courtroom for the morning's arraignments, sitting in the jury box with other shackled inmates. He was the prop, the warning. Vance wanted the other defendants to see what happened when you disrespected her. She was currently hearing the case of Devin Ellis, a young black man arrested for possession of a controlled substance. "Mr. Ellis," Vance said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "this is a serious charge, and I see here you have a prior resisting arrest. But I didn't resist," Ellis said, his voice cracking. "The officer, Mr. Ellis, I am not interested in your excuses," Vance said. "You were caught with narcotics and you have a history of non-compliance. This community will not tolerate it. I am sentencing you to the mandatory minimum of 3 years in state prison." The boy's mother, sitting in the back, let out a strangled sob. 3 years for a gram of marijuana. He's a good boy. The other charge, it was a mistake. "Remove that woman," Vance barked. As Devin Ellis was led away, his eyes met Corbin's. In them, Corbin saw the end of hope. He saw a life being broken in real time. Corbin clicked his teeth. "Agent Kane, pull the file on Devin Ellis. I want that prior arresting officer's name. I want to know who he talks to, who he takes money from. I'm betting it's Harlan." Vance, energized by her display of power, finally turned her gaze to Corbin. "Ah, Mr. Stone, back for more. I hope your accommodations were to your liking. Miss Fletcher, any progress on that $50,000 bond?" "Your Honor, you know that's impossible," Fletcher said, her voice shaking with rage. "This is punitive and it's cruel." "It's justice," Vance corrected. "And as for your client, I've reviewed the trespassing charge. I'm adding a charge of vagrancy and intent to commit public nuisance. We'll see how you feel after a few more nights, Mr. Stone. Maybe then you'll learn to respect the law." She banged her gavel, a grim smile on her face. Next case. For the following days, Corbin Hale endured the system. He ate the flavorless gray-colored food. He listened to the casual cruelty of the guards. He talked to the other inmates, and he gathered intelligence. He learned from a man in his cell block that Bailiff Harlan ran the entire commissary kickback scheme using a specific guard as his bagman. He learned that Officer Kane, the cop who arrested him, was Harlan's cousin. It was a family business. He also learned that Devin Ellis's prior resisting arrest charge had been from the same officer, Kane. It was a setup. Kane would target young black men, stop them for nothing, and if they so much as asked a question, he'd tack on a resisting charge, making them prior for Judge Vance to sentence heavily. In the command van, Agent Kane and Agent Morales were working furiously. "He was right," Kane said, his eyes glued to a financial chart on his screen. Devin Ellis's arrest. Kane. Harlan. The day after Ellis was sentenced, a payment was transferred from a police benevolent fund, which is just a slush account, to Harlan's wife. "It's dirtier than that," Agent Morales said, tapping her keyboard. "I've got the bank manager for the developer, Mr. Langley. We've been squeezing him. He just flipped. Judge Vance isn't just taking bribes to let kids off. She's directing the arrests." "What?" Kane turned, stunned. "It's a broken windows scheme. She gets a developer, let's say Grant Langley's father, to donate to her charity. In exchange, she directs Kane and Harlan to clean up the neighborhood where he wants to build his new luxury condos. That means arresting homeless people, kids hanging out, anyone who looks like a vagrant, people like Devin Stone. She gets them off the street. Langley gets his property values up, and she gets rich. And she jails the director of the FBI in the process," Kane said, rubbing his temples. "This is beyond corruption. This is feudalism." "Langley's son is in court today," Morales noted. "Grant Langley, DUI manslaughter. He hit and killed a cyclist. Let's listen in. I want to see how she handles this one." Back in courtroom 3B, the atmosphere was different. It was hushed, respectful. Grant Langley, a younger, even more arrogant version of the previous defendant, stood at the podium with the same slick lawyer, Patterson. Judge Vance's tone was somber, almost motherly. "Mr. Langley, this is a terrible, terrible tragedy," she said. "It is, Your Honor," Patterson interjected smoothly. "And my client is devastated, but the facts, which the prosecution has graciously stipulated to, show this was a tragic accident. The cyclist, Mr. James, I believe, swerved unexpectedly. My client's blood alcohol level was at the bare legal limit. He is a grieving young man." Corbin, sitting in the inmate box, watched the lie unfold. The real file which his team had showed the blood alcohol level was higher, and Langley had been speeding in a low speed zone. Yes, I see," Judge Vance said. "The prosecution has agreed to amend the charge from manslaughter to reckless driving and failure to yield. Given the extenuating circumstances and the victim's own contributory negligence, she banged her gavel. Charge dismissed upon payment of a $10,000 fine. Mr. Langley, you are free to go. Please be more careful in the future. The father, a portly man in an expensive suit sitting in the front row, nodded once at Judge Vance. A silent thank you. Vance, filled with the warmth of a job well done, then turned her cold eyes back to the inmate box. Now for the refuse. Bailiff, bring me Mr. Stone. I have a plea offer for him. Naomi Fletcher, who had watched the Langley dismissal with her mouth open in horror, rushed to the podium as Corbin was brought forward. Miss Fletcher, Vance said, the prosecutor has generously offered to drop the contempt and vagrancy charges if your client pleads guilty to trespassing and resisting arrest. The sentence will be 18 months in the county jail. A very generous offer. 18 months? Fletcher gasped. For trespassing? That's insane. He's not pleading to anything. We demand a trial by jury. A trial? Vance laughed. Fine, but his bail remains $50,000 and I'll be presiding. And I will remind you that the maximum sentence for these combined charges, especially after he has wasted the court's time with a trial, is 5 years. 18 months is a gift. She turned to Corbin. Well, Mr. Stone, are you going to be smart for once in your life? Or are you going to be stubborn? Take the deal. It's the best you're ever going to get. No, Corbin said. His voice was no longer raspy. It was flat, cold, and clear. No, I won't be taking the deal. And no, I don't want a trial by jury. Then you are a fool, Vance shouted, slamming her hand on the bench. You will rot in that jail. I am finding you in contempt again. That's another 30 days. I'll keep adding 30 days until you're a skeleton. You're not going to be adding anything, Judge, Corbin said, standing to his full height. The defeated, disheveled posture was gone. What did you say to me? Vance whispered, her eyes wide with fury. I said, Corbin repeated, his voice now carrying the unmistakable ring of command, that your time on this bench is over. Bailiff Harlan, you might want to put your hands on the podium slowly. Who the hell do you think you are? Harlan snarled, moving toward Corbin, his hand reaching for his baton. I think, Corbin said, I'm the man who has a recording of you offering a welcome package to an inmate who has a record of a kickback for the false conviction of Devin Ellis. And who knows about the offshore account in the Cayman Islands, the one you use for the commissary fund? Harlan froze, his face turning the color of ash. Judge Vance's brain tried to process what was happening. What is this? What is this nonsense? This, Corbin said, is the part where you stop talking. He turned his head and clicked his teeth. Agent Kane, we're green. Execute. The words were barely out of his mouth when the main courtroom doors burst open. In poured a dozen figures, all clad in black tactical gear, with bold white letters emblazoned on their backs. FBI. The courtroom, which had been simmering in confused silence, erupted. Reporters who had been tipped off suddenly produced cameras. Naomi Fletcher stumbled back, her hand over her mouth. Grant Langley and his father, who hadn't left yet, were frozen in their seats. Nobody move, shouted Agent Kane, his weapon held in a low, ready position. Two agents immediately peeled off and cuffed a stunned bailiff Harlan, who offered no resistance. Two more moved to secure Officer Kane, who had been observing. Judge Eleanor Vance was on her feet, her face a mask of apoplectic rage and utter confusion. What is the meaning of this? This is my courtroom. I am a sitting judge. You have no authority here. I'll have all of you disbarred and jailed. Corbin Hale simply unclipped the front of his orange jail jumpsuit. Underneath, taped to his chest, was a small waterproof packet. He tore it open and produced a set of credentials and a badge. He walked past the bar and slapped them on the ledge of the judge's bench. Judge Eleanor Vance, he said, his voice now a booming baritone that needed no microphone. My name is not Devin Stone. It is Director Corbin Hale of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The badge gleamed under the courtroom lights. If the room had been loud before, it was now cathedral silent. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Vance stared at the badge. She looked at the disheveled man. No. The director standing before her. She looked at the FBI agents fanned out across her kingdom. The calculation was impossible. Her mind simply broke. No, she whispered. It's a lie. It's a trick. He's a vagrant. I'm the vagrant you tried to jail for 18 months for trespassing. Corbin corrected her, his eyes like chips of ice. I'm the project. You had your bailiff beat me in a holding cell. I'm the refuse you thought you could sweep away. He turned to Agent Kane. Is it done? Yes, sir, Kane said. Agent Morales has simultaneous warrants being served on the bank manager, 3 of Patterson's law partners, and she is personally freezing all of Judge Vance's known assets, including the charity and the Cayman account. Good. Corbin turned back to Vance, who had collapsed into her high-backed chair. She was no longer a tyrant. She was just a small, pale old woman. Eleanor Vance, Corbin said, his voice formal. You are under arrest for violation of Title 18, United States Code Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. You are under arrest for racketeering. You are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. He nodded to Agent Kane. Cuff her. You can't, Vance whimpered as Kane and another agent moved up to the bench. Judicial immunity. There is no immunity for this, Corbin. Corbin said. There is no immunity for running a criminal enterprise. There is no immunity for destroying lives. You weren't a judge. You were a mob boss in a robe. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the chamber. It was the same sound her gavel had made, but this one was final. You set me up, she screamed as they pulled her to her feet, her hands bound behind her back. This is entrapment. Entrapment, Corbin said, is when the government induces a person to commit a crime they otherwise wouldn't. Tell me, Judge, did I induce you to hate me on sight? Did I induce you to set an unconstitutional bail? Did I induce you to have me beaten? Or did you do all of that all by yourself simply because you looked at my face and decided I was worthless? He didn't wait for his answer. He pointed to the front row. Agent Kane, arrest Grant Langley and his father. The charge is bribery of a public official. Patterson, too. He's an accessory. As Vance was led, weeping and cursing from the bench, her bench, she was forced to walk past the man she had tried to destroy. You'll pay for this, she shrieked at him. Corbin just looked at her. No, Judge, you're the one who's going to pay. For the first time in your life, you're finally going to be held accountable. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The courthouse was shut down by federal marshals. The press, who had only been expecting a small-time corruption story, had just witnessed the arrest of the century. Corbin Hale, still in his dirty t-shirt and jail jumpsuit, stood in the center of the chaos, a general on a battlefield he had just conquered. Sir, Agent Kane said, handing him a satellite phone, the Attorney General is on line 1. Corbin took it. Mr. Attorney General, yes, sir, it's done. The arat was deep. Yes, she's in custody. No, sir, I'm fine, a little sore. He listened for a moment. I agree. We need to audit every single case she's ever presided over, and I need the Civil Rights Division down here now. He hung up and looked at the stunned faces remaining in the courtroom. The lawyers, the clerks, the reporters. They were all looking at him with a mixture of terror and awe. He saw Naomi Fletcher, the public defender, pressed against the back wall, tears streaming down her face. He walked over to her. She flinched. Miss Fletcher, he said, his voice softening. Director Hale, she whispered. I had no idea. I tried. She was so powerful. You did what you could, Corbin said. You were the only person in this room who spoke up for me. The only one who spoke up for Devin Ellis. It wasn't enough. It will be now, Corbin said. He handed her a business card. My team is going to need a statement. But more than that, we're going to need your help. You know the victims. You know the files. We're going to form a task force to review every nonviolent conviction Judge Vance has issued. I want you to help me lead it. Fletcher stared at the card. Me? But I'm just... You're a good lawyer, Miss Fletcher. You just needed to be in a courtroom that wasn't broken. Welcome to the new one. He left her and walked to the holding cell area by the courtroom. He had the marshals open the cell where the other inmates, including Devin Ellis, had been returned during the raid. Ellis looked up terrified as the FBI director, still in inmate attire, stood before him. Devin Ellis, Corbin said. My name is Corbin Hale. I know, Ellis said. I saw. The charges against you are being dismissed. All of them. The prior resisting charge is being expunged from your record. Officer Kane is not a cop. He's a criminal, and he's going to prison. Ellis just stared, unable to comprehend. Your mother is outside, Corbin said. Go home." Ellis stood up, tears welling in his eyes. He walked past Corbin and then stopped. "Why? Why you? You could have... You're the director." "Because," Corbin said, "if the system can do this to the director of the FBI, I had to find out what it was doing to everyone else. Now go get your life back." As Ellis ran out to find his mother, Agent Morales approached, a tablet in her hand. "Sir," Morales said, "it's even worse than we thought. We've got the bank manager. Vance wasn't just taking bribes, she was selling sentences, literally. She had a price list. She was charging a surcharge for minority defendants. It was an administrative fee. If the defendant was black or Hispanic, the bribe price was higher. She told the developers it was because it was harder to justify. Sir, she monetized her own racism." Corbin closed his eyes. The sheer transactional evil of it was staggering. "Where is she now?" he asked. "Federal holding downtown. She's screaming for her lawyer. She's about to learn that Patterson is in the cell next to her." "Good," Corbin said. "I'm going to get cleaned up. Then I want to be in that interrogation room. She and I are going to have a long talk about that price list." The legal proceedings against Eleanor Vance and her criminal enterprise were swift and brutal. The United States Attorney's Office, with the full backing of the Department of Justice, threw the book at her. Vance, stripped of her assets, was forced to accept a court-appointed defender, a fact that seemed to humiliate her more than the charges themselves. She tried to play the victim. She claimed she was a political prisoner, a target of a deep state conspiracy. She accused Director Hale of planting evidence, of entrapment, of violating her rights. But the evidence was too vast. First, there was the audio. The courtroom heard in crystal-clear digital sound Corbin Hale's voice as Devin Stone being respectful, and they heard Judge Vance's voice dripping with venom and racial animus. "People like you drain our resources. I'll have you in contempt until you're a skeleton." Then there was the beating. The audio of Bailiff Harlan and his guards assaulting Corbin in his cell was played. The jury listened to the sickening thud of fists and Harlan's voice. The judge doesn't like being disrespected. Harlan and the guards had already pleaded guilty and were testifying against her in exchange for a lighter sentence. Then there was the money. Agent Morales presented a financial flowchart that showed the money from Langley, from other developers, from law firms flowing into her charity, then being laundered through offshore accounts, and finally ending up in her possession to buy a beach house, a luxury car, and an extensive wine collection. Finally, there was the testimony. Maria Gonzalez, the whistleblower, told her story of being fired and threatened. Naomi Fletcher, no longer timid, spoke, detailing the atmosphere of terror Vance cultivated, and then dozens of victims, mothers, fathers, and siblings of people like Devin Ellis, people who had lost their children, their homes, their jobs, all because of Vance's corrupt, racist justice. The jury deliberated briefly. Eleanor Vance was found guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was packed. Corbin Hale sat in the front row, this time in a perfectly tailored suit. He was not there as a victim, but as a witness, representing the system she had almost broken. The new judge, a no-nonsense federal judge, looked down at Vance. "Eleanor Vance," he began, "you have been found guilty of crimes so heinous they strike at the very heart of our democracy. A judge is the final line of defense for the Constitution. You turned that defense into a toll booth. You didn't just break the law, you were the law, and you used that power to feed your own greed and your own pathetic prejudices." Vance, in an orange jumpsuit, started to speak. "You will be silent," the judge roared. "You were silent when the families of the men you railroaded begged for mercy. You were silent when you took bribes to let the wealthy and the guilty walk free. Now it is your turn to be silent." He shuffled his papers. "I see here in your own files your preferred sentencing. You were fond of mandatory minimums. You were fond of maximum sentences. You believed in making an example of people. So I will follow your precedent. On the counts of racketeering and conspiracy, I sentence you to 30 years in federal prison. On the counts of money laundering, I sentence you to 20 years. On the counts of deprivation of civil rights, I sentence you to 10 years for each count. These sentences will not be served concurrently. They will be served consecutively." A lawyer in the gallery did the math and gasped. It was a life sentence. And it is a merciful one. You will be transferred not to a comfortable facility, but to the federal supermax, where you will spend the rest of your natural life in a cell, just as you planned for so many others. You will have no power. You will have no influence. You will, for all intents and purposes, cease to exist. You are a blight on this nation, and you are dismissed." As she was led out, screaming, her eyes found Corbin's. He didn't smile. He didn't smirk. He just held her gaze, a silent testament to the fact that justice, though it may grind slowly, had finally ground her to dust. The day after Judge Eleanor Vance was led from her courtroom in handcuffs, the city held its breath. The arrest of a sitting judge by the FBI was not just a news story. It was an earthquake that had cracked the very foundations of the city's justice system. The public was left standing on the rubble, wondering what, if anything, was still standing. For Director Corbin Hale, the arrest was not the end. It was the beginning of the war. His first act was to establish a command center in the very courthouse Vance had poisoned. He commandeered a high-floor conference suite. Within hours, it was transformed into the Justice Shield Task Force headquarters. The walls were papered with flowcharts, photographs, and timelines. In the center of it all sat Naomi Fletcher. She had barely slept, but she was electric. "Look at this," she said, tapping a file on the long table. Corbin and Agent Kane moved closer. The file was about Miguel Ramirez, arrested for a broken taillight and resisting arrest by Officer Kane again. But look at the transcript. Vance asked him his plea. He said he wasn't guilty, but he didn't have money for a lawyer or for bail. Vance found him in contempt. Then she found him in contempt again for asking what that meant. She stacked contempt charges until the broken taillight became a sentence. But it gets worse. She held him until he took a deal just to get out. He's now a convicted felon for a broken taillight. He lost his job, his apartment, his life obliterated. "How many?" Corbin asked, his voice a low rumble. "We've flagged over 2,000 cases just like this," Agent Morales said. "Nonviolent minority defendants, disproportionately high sentences, and almost all of them represented by the public defender's office because she knew they were too overworked to fight her." "She wasn't just a racist," Fletcher said, slamming the file shut. "She was a predator. She was targeting the weak because she knew they couldn't fight back." "She had help," Corbin said, turning to the wall. He pointed to a photo of the district attorney. The district attorney had prided himself on his untouchability. When the FBI requested his presence for an informal interview, he arrived with his lawyer, full of bluster. He was shown to an interrogation room. Corbin Hale was waiting for him, still in the simple t-shirt and jeans. "Director Hale," the DA began, "this is a travesty. Eleanor Vance was a rogue element, a tragic, isolated case. My office had no—" Corbin cut him off. He slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was an email. "Is that your signature?" The DA's face went pale. "Read it aloud," Corbin ordered. Agent Kane read the email directing AD as to support Vance in clearing certain cases for urban renewal. "Give her what she needs," Corbin said. "Wins. Was Devin Ellis a win? Was Miguel Ramirez a win?" The DA's arrogance shattered. "I'll testify," he whispered. "I'll tell you everything. The other lawyers, the developers, Patterson. I'll give you all of them." "You will," Corbin said. "You're going to stand up in open court, and you're going to confess to every single life you helped destroy, and then you're going to prison." The first ripple of the dam breaking was the release of Devin Ellis. His mother had been waiting outside the county jail. Naomi Fletcher sat with her. The heavy steel gate buzzed. Devin Ellis stood there, blinking in the bright sunlight. He wasn't in a jumpsuit. He was in the same clothes he'd been arrested in. He saw his mother. "Mama!" His voice was a crack. His mother didn't run. She walked, her legs shaking, and then she collapsed against him, her sobs echoing. "My boy. They gave me back my boy." Ellis just cried, his face buried in her shoulder. "I thought I was gone." "It's over, Devin," Fletcher said, her voice firm. "It's really over. The charges are gone. The prior charge is gone. It's like it never happened. You're free." She handed him a card. "This is the number for the task force. We're setting up a victims' compensation fund. We can't give you back the time you lost, but we're going to give you everything else." As he and his mother walked away, holding on to each other, Corbin Hale watched from an unmarked car down the street. "That's one," Agent Kane said. "One," Corbin repeated. "One down. Thousands to go." The karma for the wealthy was colder. Grant Langley and his father had their assets frozen. They were forced to accept the same plea deals they had once paid to avoid. They stood before the new judge looking like ghosts. Their expensive suits were gone. "Mr. Langley Sr., the judge said with contempt, You were a builder. You were supposed to build this city up. Instead, you chose to build your luxury condos on the foundation of human misery. You paid Eleanor Vance to clean up neighborhoods by illegally jailing the poor and the black. You didn't just bribe a judge. You funded a campaign of terror. The judge sentenced them to long terms in federal prison. All their assets were forfeit. The final and hardest piece of karma was reserved for Eleanor Vance. She was classified as high risk and sent to the Supermax facility. When she arrived, she was processed. "Stand on the yellow line," a guard barked. "I am a former judge," Vance tried. "I have rights. I demand to speak to the warden." The guard looked up. "Your inmate number is 82291. You have the right to shut up." Strip. Humiliated, cold, and powerless, Eleanor Vance was subjected to the same invasive search she had sentenced thousands of others to. She was given an orange jumpsuit and led down a long, echoing concrete hall. The sound of men screaming and banging on doors was deafening. "You're in special management," the guard said, stopping at a solid steel door. 23-hour-a-day lockdown. "I can't be in general population," Vance panted, the panic setting in. "They'll kill me. I put people in here." "Should have thought of that before, sweetheart." The guard unlocked the heavy door. "You've got a cellmate. We had to move her. She doesn't play well with others." The door slid open. The cell was a tiny concrete box. Sitting on the lower bunk was a broad, muscular woman with tattoos covering her neck and face. She looked up slowly, her eyes as dead and cold as a shark's. "This," the guard said with a cruel smirk, "is Mama Diaz. She's particularly famous for running the Justice for Judges program inside. Seems her brother got railroaded by a judge. He died inside. She hates crooked judges, don't you, Diaz?" Mama Diaz didn't say anything. She just closed her book and stood up slowly. She was a full foot taller than Vance. "No, please," Vance whimpered, backing away. The guard shoved Vance inside. "Have a good life, inmate." The heavy door slammed shut. The clack of the pneumatic bolts sliding into place was the last sound of freedom Eleanor Vance would ever hear. She was left in the dark with the physical embodiment of the karmic debt she had accrued over a lifetime of cruelty. Sometime later, Courtroom 3B was reopened. The room had been exorcised. The dark wood was scrubbed and polished. The lighting was bright and warm. The air no longer smelled of desperation. A new defendant, a young man named Kevin, stood nervously at the podium. He was there for shoplifting. At the bench, a new figure sat. "Please be seated," she said. It was Judge Naomi Fletcher, robed and confirmed. She looked at the young man not with contempt, but with a weary patience. "Mr. Allen, I've read your file. I see you're struggling. I see you've got a job interview next week, and the prosecutor tells me you stole a tie and a bar of soap. Is that right?" "Yes, Your Honor," Kevin whispered, bracing for the hammer to fall. "The district attorney's office has recommended diversion," Fletcher said, looking at the new young prosecutor. "I agree. The charges will be dismissed provided you complete 40 hours of community service, but I'm adding a condition." She looked to the back of the courtroom. "The court administrator, Ms. Maria Gonzalez, has agreed to personally mentor you. She's going to help you with your resume, and she's already found a clothing bank that will give you a full suit. No one should have to steal to look for a job." Maria Gonzalez, the former clerk who had started it all, stood up and nodded at Kevin with a kind smile. "See me after, son. We'll get you sorted." Kevin looked from Maria to Judge Fletcher, his eyes wide with hope. "Thank you, Your Honor." "You're welcome, Mr. Allen," Fletcher said. "See that you do well." She banged her gavel. It made a clean, crisp sound, the sound of justice, not of doom. From the last row of the gallery, hidden in the shadows, Director Corbin Hale watched. He saw the system he had broken open, now healing, being run by the very people who had been its victims. He stood and walked out, unseen. He met Agent Kane on the courthouse steps. The sun was setting, painting the city in gold. "It's done," Kane said. "The task force just processed its last case. Miguel Ramirez, he got a full pardon and a substantial settlement from the victim's fund." "Good," Corbin said, looking at the city. "They're calling themselves the Survivors Club now. Devin Ellis is in trade school. Maria Gonzalez is running for city council. The new district attorney just indicted Officer Kane's entire precinct. You started a revolution, sir." "We started to clean up," Corbin corrected. "It's not over. There's always another Vance." There's always another system built on greed and prejudice, but not this one. Not here, not now. He put on his sunglasses. Let's go home, Kane. We've got work to do. The next one is already out there. He walked down the steps, not as a victim, not as a vagrant, but as a guardian. He had worn the face of the forgotten to remind the powerful that no one, not even a judge, is above the law, and that karma sometimes carries a badge. In the end, it took one man willing to descend into the belly of the beast to tear down a corrupt kingdom. Judge Vance believed she was the law, but she forgot that no one is ever truly above it. The hard karma of justice finally came for her, and it came in the form of the very man she tried to crush. Her kingdom of prejudice was dismantled, and hundreds of innocent lives were restored. This story is a reminder that the fight for justice is real, and it happens every day. If you are on the edge of your seat, and if you believe that good must always confront evil, then please show your support. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to see that karma is real. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice served. Thank you for watching.